G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle. For some time now, both Kat and I have made fun of the continued minor mistakes being made by Games Workshop when it comes to the marketing of their miniatures. On the surface, this seems pretty trivial. It seems petty, it seems pointless. But I want to take the time today to explain why we see this as a bigger issue than most people deem it to be. There are actually several issues at play which culminate as one large problem. And it's not just marketing, but rather it spreads across multiple aspects of the written side of the hobby as well. The first and most obvious of this is that it has happened multiple times. Whether it's the Death Guard release being the 7th Legion, or Tartarus armoured characters such as the one on screen right now being called a Cataphractii character. By the way, still not updated on the Forge World website. This also has actual gameplay consequences for that particular model. Now, take the Death Guard trailer. It was the cornerstone of a massive hype campaign for the release of an entire sub-faction and the return of the third Primarch in the 40k timeline, one of the largest events in 40k history. This wasn't the fat-fingered flubbing of an intern. This was someone writing the script wrong, nobody picked it up, and when editing the script was approved for marketing use, the dialogue recorded, the visuals made to supplement it, and it was then shown to the senior management for marketing approval, and then they too signed off on it. That's not a case of a minor mistake. That's a chain of fails from bottom to top, and I can assure you, people would get some major reprimands within my company if they made such an error. The second issue is that it shows a chronic lack of attention to detail. I don't even work there, but I can tell you it was wrong off the top of my head. So there's simply no excuse, especially with the correct numeral present on the model in the picture, at least twice. The model, of course, I'm referring to here is the Remus Ventanus model, which you're currently seeing on the right-hand side of the screen now. If a person cannot correctly perform such a task as simple as the Legion numeral for a particular force, what faith can you put in them or the organisation they represent to correctly perform the tasks we as the customer require in return for our money? The product is sold for a massive markup over the entire miniatures industry, whether it's historicals, sci-fi, whatever it may be. With that price comes an expectation of quality. So, let's think back to the previous example of the Death Guard Legion being called the 7th in the trailer. Ask yourself where it sits in the knowledge tree. So, let's quickly talk about the knowledge tree, and what do I mean here? Well, if you're an organisation, you need to know certain criteria to say that you understand your job or your product correctly. This is what populates the tree or the pyramid or whatever shape you so desire. There's the foundation, the bottom of the tree, the largest. So let's use an example here of retail. If you're a retail assistant, some, but not all of your key knowledge would include things like what stock you carry, understanding how the stock is utilised by the clients, being able to communicate said knowledge to a customer. So if you were to combine these three aspects, you would have an example of saying to the customer, hey, we have none of that item in stock, but it'll be in next week. By doing so, you've just demonstrated that you understand the product and that it exists, the availability of the product, what the customer's size is that they need, and you've correctly assessed the situation and provided that info to the customer in a perfect world. Higher up on the tree, you might include things like ordering in new stock to replace the old stock, operating the computer systems, things like that. Even higher up on that tree, you start to develop an overlap with the roles above or below your workstation, such as performing the tasks of the manager if the manager is unavailable or sick, on leave, whatever it is. These roles are less likely to come up on the average day-to-day running of the job, so they're further up the tree, further away from your starting position because they're less important to you on a day-to-day basis. So let's apply that thinking to Games Workshop and the marketing team. Now, not the sales team, marketing, because they are two different things. Sales is all about attitude. Marketing is about fact and promotion. So, beyond the ability to type words on a screen and put photos up, the bottom of the tree is knowing your game systems. That means Age of Sigmar, Warhammer 40,000, Horus Heresy, Middle-earth, etc. The next tier up is knowing the factions within those systems. So, for example, in 40k it might be Space Marines, Chaos, Eldar, Orcs. Next, you need to know the major sub-factions. Nobody cares about a chapter like the Charnel Guard, but they should know the Ultramarines. Then, you have key lore next, such as the 18 Space Marine Legions, 1 Emperor, 18 Primarchs, 9 Loyal Legions, 9 Traitor Legions. The Legions became chapters. The chapters have 1,000 Marines. That sits at this category. Then, you have the key characters in said faction. For Ultramarines, you might have Rabude Gilliman, Marneus Kelgar, Cato Sicarius. Following on from that, you have the key equipment. Bolt gun, power armor, shuriken, las gun, pulse rifle, broadside battlesuit, rhino. And lastly, you have the rules for said factions. Think of it like how a codex itself is laid out for any incoming player of the game. It says 40k on the front cover. Then it says who it's for. Inside it, you'll find your sub-faction rules and the background for the faction, the history of them as a race in the game. The key characteristics and characters are mentioned in the background, and you get their rules by the end of the book. It's simple. Read each codex, and if you absorb it, you've absorbed pretty much everything you need to know about the game as a marketer. Better yet, previewing a new Space Marine unit and article should say, and most do, 40k. Space Marine, Ultramarines, character, Terminator armor, and an example special rule. That is the key information that needs to be transmitted to the customer. If you mess with that order, you've failed. Example, if you only say, new Space Marine in armor, you've given too little info. And if you give so little info, you haven't said what the game system is, what the faction is, what the type of armor is. So most of the info a person needs isn't there. Some of this information can be displayed through imagery, but if what you write and what you show contradict, there's an issue because only a customer who understands the difference will be able to discern the truth. That is the knowledge tree for marketing the game. So let's assess the Death Guard example now. In the 7th Legion video, we're told it's for Warhammer 40,000. We know that it's the Death Guard sub-faction. We're not told that its parent faction is Chaos, however. And we're told that they're the 7th Legion, which is the big mistake. So, there are still, in my mind, 3 more levels of knowledge that could be bestowed by the team in such a preview video, but they're further down the line, and they had to recite just one of the 18 numbers of legions, which is one of the key criteria that defines that faction within the universe. It's one of 18 numbers. It's not one of 50,000. It's information that's commonly available in any codex, and most fans know it off the top of their head. If I say 10th Legion, people will know that that's Iron Hands. If I say 13th, that's Ultramarines. If I say 14th, that's Death Guard. 7th is Imperial Fists. If you're marketing a product, I think that it's core that you understand the product. Any marketing rep worth their salt can answer their customers' questions on the spot. And if you're that retail assistant, thinking back to the earlier example, and the customer asks you, do you have an item in their size, and you can't answer that question, if you can't answer what the item is, or the size of it, you're failing as a retail assistant. In my mind, if you're working for $1 billion company, and you fail to regurgitate relatively simple information like a Legion number, you're missing key knowledge that you probably should have for that role. That worries me as a customer, because that hole in the knowledge base I perceive at multiple levels, due to how many people who should know the answer are involved but didn't rectify the issue. You can apply the same criteria of a knowledge base to the next big failing, which is incorrect rules. These are all too common, and again, a symptom of a lack of attention to detail. A Day 1 FAQ should not occur for any of the written materials, and yet just about everything and every codex has one. It's a problem which has only increased over time, and it never used to be a thing in older editions of the game. And it's down to the writers just simply not paying enough attention. It could be due to time constraints, or because they've got too much on their plate. But point is, it's not being resolved. Take for one example, and I'll use the Horus Heresy here because I understand it better than the other game systems. Book 8 of the Horus Heresy, we introduced the White Scar's full rules. In there they have a rite of war called the Chagorian Brotherhood. It's a thematic list, and it's all about emphasizing what the White Scars are best known for, bikes and bike warfare. It is designed to be led by a Master of the Legion. It's a special rule, by the way, that's applied to high-up characters that you can buy for points in the game, such as the Primarch or Legion Masters. They must be riding specifically a Legion Scimitar jet bike or an Outrider bike in order to unlock this Rite of War. However, there's two problems here. The first is that the standard characters can upgrade to a special pattern of jet bike unique to the Legion, the Shamsir. Well, despite it being a jet bike and a variant of the Scimitar, the Rite of War in black and white states specifically that only those bikes and not the Shamsir, by rules as written, are allowed. A minor point, sure, but it gets worse because then the Primarch himself, the guy who is built from the ground up to run this list, he rides a Sojutsu pattern jet bike, so he cannot legally be used in the list either. Oops. Now, one could make the point that really, that's a minor error, and you can just interpret it another way, and I agree. But it's a symptom of a bigger problem. Interpreting it another way isn't technically legal at events. The TO would have to make an exception for that particular person. In playing games at home, nobody cares, but for some people, events and tournaments are important. You also see this problem often occurring in the Big Two systems, in Age of Sigmar and 40k, where the lack of key words makes some units just fail to function correctly within their faction. If you are a rules writer, understanding how your rules interact with one another is right near the base of the knowledge tree. There's no two ways about it. What's worse is if something breaks a faction and the consequences were not thought through. An example of that is from my personal experience with the Thousand Suns Legion in 30k. Rules on release had them as superior spellcasters, thanks to having not just more psychers, but casting more easily. The trade-off for this, though, was large negative penalties for failures to successfully cast. When the Legion was FAQ'd, they lost the ability to cast more easily, but the major negatives remained unaltered, and, even worse, their access to certain abilities was also lost. As a consequence, that faction cannot perform as well in their intended role as other legions now. There are other legions who have access to psychers which are now more reliable and have access to a greater variety of powers than the Thousand Suns do. That's a fundamental failing of the rules writing, as the intent of the faction being the psychic powerhouse and their unique playstyle has been circumvented. Yes, they can still be made to work, but it's usually with cheap tricks like using the Primarch, who is overpowered by default being a Primarch, being powered up by the rest of the Legion acting as psychic batteries, rather than as psychers in their own right, and that's not how it was intended to play. Additionally, the introduction of Psi Arcana in Book 8 made things even worse, as in the quest to weaken top-tier psychers like Magnus, Ahriman, Amon, or Lorgar, they introduced a variety of strong equipment which was highly effective against psychers. What's the problem with that? Well, it's effective against someone like Magnus, someone you'll see maybe once in 100 games. But what effect do you think that equipment has when played against low-tier psychers, level 1s and level 2s, as opposed to a level 5 Primarch? It's completely and utterly disproportionately overpowered as a counter. The writers didn't think the problem through. And these basic issues I've described in this video, they're not the tiny flaws that they seem like on the surface. What does getting, for example, the type of armor wrong on a Forge World console matter? Well, it turns out that it's advertising a product to the purchaser which doesn't perform the task for which it is labelled. What does calling a Herald of the 13th Legion, specifically a special character, a member of the 8th Legion, the Night Lords, mean? Well, it breeds that same confusion, and worse, an utter lack of confidence in the company, at least for me personally. If something so simple, so low down on the knowledge tree, something which many of the gamers, let alone the professionals, know can be messed up, what faith can we place in an organisation that makes those mistakes? Clearly there is a lack of professionalism on display, and it's across multiple departments. It can be naming a model right, it can be messing up the rules, it can be authors of novels hard contradicting one another, which happens a lot. All of it is toxic for the customer. You can call me names, you can tease me, you can deride me for making so much fuss about plastic soldiers on the table, But I'd like to remind you of something. In the eyes of the law, it's a business. They're exchanging goods for money, and they are worth supposedly over $1 billion as a company. It doesn't matter if they're selling plastic or if they're selling gold. It's real money at stake, and real money has real consequences. I'm sure if these mistakes led to a drop in revenue for the company, the shareholders wouldn't be so forgiving because it's some plastic toys now, would they? You pay for this product, and you have every right to demand better. The default position from people shouldn't be, if you don't like it, just walk away, because you have a financial investment in the system. Just walk away is potentially a very unhealthy view, because rather than try and fix a toxic relationship, you're just accepting the status quo and removing something you love from your life, denying yourself that joy. And that's why I make these videos, looking at the faults and making such noise about relatively minor subjects. Because I like the game, I like the universe, I like the world, and it brings me happiness. And rather than just maintaining the relationship and the bad elements of it, the company seems to just go above and beyond to have a lopsided relationship with the customer. Capitalism is about making money. Yes, I get that. But nothing says they have to make that money at the expense of customer satisfaction. That's a terrible attitude. If you can make the same amount of money and make the customer happy, isn't that preferential? After all, the relationship should be a give and take arrangement on both sides of the coin. They provide what we want as a customer, and we provide them money. We want good games, good background, fair price miniatures, availability of miniatures, and the company just wants money in return. Instead, it's arguable that they deliver none of that anymore. But they demand more money than ever. And, well, call me Mr. Circle, but that seems a lot more toxic than anything I say on this supposedly horrible channel. Anyway, that's my thoughts. That is why such basic, trivial, simple things actually kind of stick out to me as a major issue. If it's not a problem for you and you think it's fine, all the power in the world to you. You're not any more right or wrong than I am. But if you're of the same mindset as me, maybe I've said something that, resounds with you, please let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.